Imagine walking into a store, your own store, only to be treated like you don't belong there. That's exactly what happened to one powerful CEO, a man who had built his business from the ground up. But today, he wasn't stepping inside as the owner. He was walking in as a regular customer, undercover, ready to see how his staff truly treated people. The moment he entered, he immediately noticed something strange. A well-dressed man in a tailored suit was greeted warmly, offered assistance before he even asked. The employees smiled, nodding eagerly, treating him with the utmost respect. But then, the CEO's eyes landed on a woman in casual clothes, waiting near the checkout. She had been standing there for minutes, completely ignored. His gut tightened. Was this how customers were treated in his store? Determined to find out, he approached a young male employee in his late 20s. With a polite smile, he asked, "Excuse me, could you help me with something?" The employee barely looked up. His expression twisted with mild annoyance, his eyes scanning the CEO from head to toe. Then, with a smirk, he gave a response that would soon become the biggest mistake of his career. The employee sighed, rolling his eyes as he finally looked at the CEO. But instead of offering assistance, his expression showed nothing but irritation. "Yeah, we're kind of busy right now," he muttered, barely making eye contact. "You can look around yourself." The CEO raised an eyebrow. Busy? The store was nearly empty, and the employee had just spent the last 2 minutes chatting with a coworker. Still, the CEO remained calm and polite. "I just have a quick question about this product," he said, gesturing toward a high-end designer item. "Can you tell me about the features?" The employee let out a dramatic sigh, shifting his weight impatiently. "That's pretty expensive," he said flatly. "Not really worth explaining if you're just browsing." The CEO's stomach tightened. Did this employee just assume he couldn't afford it? Still, he kept his cool. "I'd still like to know." The employee finally crossed his arms, looking him up and down. "Look, man," he said with a smirk, "the store isn't really for everyone. We don't usually waste time on—" He stopped himself, but the meaning was clear. At that moment, the CEO realized exactly what was happening. It wasn't about being busy. It wasn't about browsing. This employee had already decided who was worth helping and who wasn't. And right now, he had judged the CEO as someone who wasn't. Meanwhile, across the showroom, a well-dressed man in a designer suit walked in. The same employee who had just dismissed the CEO suddenly straightened his posture, flashing his best sales smile. "Welcome, sir," he greeted enthusiastically. "Let me know if I can help with anything today." The contrast was staggering. The CEO watched in silence, his jaw clenching. His own employee had just ignored him, treated him as if he didn't belong, while rolling out the red carpet for someone else. He had come undercover to see if his store was living up to his vision. Now, he had his answer, and the employee had no idea who he had just dismissed. The CEO took a slow breath, deciding to push things one step further. The CEO took a slow breath, his jaw tightening as he watched the employee switch attitudes instantly, dismissing him 1 second and rolling out the red carpet for the well-dressed customer the next. The difference was obvious, but the CEO wasn't done yet. He decided to push things a little further, to see just how deep this problem went. Still standing nearby, he picked up the same high-end product again and turned back to the employee. "Actually," he said, keeping his voice calm, "I'd like to buy this." The employee barely glanced at him before chuckling under his breath. "Yeah, sure," he scoffed. "Do you even know how much that costs?" The CEO's stomach twisted, not because of what the employee said, but because of how casual it was. Like this kind of judgment was normal. Still, he remained calm. "I don't see the price listed. Can you tell me?" The employee let out another dramatic sigh, clearly losing patience. "Look, man," he said, lowering his voice as if trying to be discreet. "I don't want to embarrass you. But this isn't the kind of store where people just look at expensive things. If you can't afford it, there's no point in wasting time." That was it. That was the moment the CEO knew for sure. This wasn't just one bad employee having a bad day. This was a mindset, an attitude that had been allowed to exist in his own company. And that was unacceptable. Meanwhile, the well-dressed customer from earlier approached the counter, casually looking at a similar high-end product. The same employee who had just dismissed the CEO turned toward him with a bright, eager smile. "Would you like to see this in a different color, sir?" he asked, his tone completely different. "We also have some exclusive options in the back." The CEO watched in silence, his mind made up. It was time to end this game. The CEO took one final breath before reaching into his pocket to pull out something that would change everything. The CEO reached into his pocket, his heart steady, his mind made up. The employee smirked, clearly convinced he had won, that he had put this browsing customer in his place. But then, the CEO pulled out his business card and calmly placed it on the counter. The employee barely glanced at it at first, until he saw the name printed on it. His eyes widened. His smirk vanished. His entire body stiffened. The room felt silent, because the name on that card wasn't just any name. It belonged to the owner of the entire company. The CEO watched as the employee's face drained of color, his confidence melting into panic. Slowly, the CEO folded his arms and spoke. "Let me introduce myself properly," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I am the founder and CEO of this company. I built this business from nothing, and today I came here undercover to see how my customers are treated." The entire store went still. Nearby employees stopped what they were doing, staring in shock. The well-dressed customer, the one who had been receiving all the attention, turned to watch the unfolding disaster. The employee stammered, his hands shaking slightly. "Sir, Mr. Daniels, I didn't—" The CEO cut him off. "You didn't what?" he asked, tilting his head slightly. "You didn't think I was worth your time? You didn't think I could afford to shop in my own store?" The employee swallowed hard, his earlier arrogance now completely gone. Other staff members looked at each other, realizing the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just an awkward moment. This was a career-ending mistake. The CEO let the silence hang in the air, letting the weight of the employee's actions sink in. Then, finally, he spoke again. "I gave you every opportunity to do your job." He gestured toward the customers watching in stunned silence. "And instead, you chose to judge me, to judge other customers, to make assumptions about who deserved respect." The employee's lips trembled, but he had nothing to say, because deep down, he knew the CEO was right. The CEO took a slow step forward, looking the employee directly in the eye. "Tell me," he said, "why should someone like you still work for my company?" The employee's throat went dry, his mind racing for a way out of this nightmare. Just moments ago, he had felt in control, dismissing a customer he thought didn't belong. Now, he was standing face to face with the owner of the entire company, the same man he had just treated like a nobody. The CEO's question still hung in the air. "Tell me, why should someone like you still work for my company?" The employee stammered, his hands shaking slightly. "Sir, I didn't mean to offend you. It was just a mistake, a misunderstanding." The CEO didn't flinch. A mistake? He repeated. Or a habit? The employee swallowed hard. He could feel every pair of eyes in the store locked on him, the other staff, the customers, even his own co-workers, who had once laughed at his dismissive attitude. The CEO shook his head. You didn't hesitate to ignore me. You didn't hesitate to assume I wasn't worth your time. He gestured toward the well-dressed man nearby. But the moment you saw someone you thought was valuable, you changed your entire attitude. The employee tried to speak again, but the CEO raised a hand, stopping him. Tell me, is that how we treat customers here? Is that the standard we set? The employee opened his mouth, but no words came out, because they both knew the answer. Silence filled the store. The CEO took a slow breath, glancing around at the staff and customers watching. Then his voice dropped just slightly, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. You don't just represent yourself when you put on this uniform. You represent me. You represent my vision. And what you've shown me today, it's not just an insult to me, it's an insult to this entire company. The employee's face went pale. Sir, please, he started, desperation creeping into his voice. I'll do better. I swear. The CEO watched him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he made his decision. The CEO's gaze didn't waver as he finally spoke. You're done here. The store remained silent as the CEO's words settled in. You're done here. The employee's face turned pale, his mouth opening as if to argue, but nothing came out. He knew there was no excuse that could undo what had just happened. Sir, please, just give me one more chance, the employee begged, his voice shaking. I swear I'll do better. The CEO didn't respond right away. He simply looked around the store, making eye contact with the other employees. Some looked nervous, others relieved, but all of them understood one thing. Things were about to change. Finally, the CEO exhaled and spoke. This isn't just about one bad decision. It's about the culture of this store. He turned to the other employees. And I want to make something very clear. This kind of behavior has no place here. He looked back at the employee one last time. You judged people based on their appearance. You made assumptions about who deserved respect. And for that, you no longer work for me. The employee swallowed hard, nodding slowly. Without another word, he removed his name tag, placed it on the counter, and walked out. The other employees remained frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. The CEO turned toward the staff, his expression firm but calm. Now, for the rest of you, I need to know something. He glanced at their faces. Do you believe in what this company stands for? Do you want to be part of something that treats all customers with respect? A moment of hesitation. Then one employee, a young woman from the checkout counter, stepped forward. I do, sir, she said. I've seen this kind of behavior happen before, and I knew it was wrong. I just didn't think I had the power to stop it. The CEO nodded slowly. You do now. The young woman looked surprised. What do you mean? The CEO smiled slightly. Congratulations, you're the new store supervisor. Gasps rippled through the staff. The employee's eyes widened. Me? The CEO nodded. You stood by your values. That's the kind of leadership this store needs. The atmosphere in the room shifted. This wasn't just about firing one bad employee. This was about changing the entire culture. The CEO clapped his hands once, looking at the staff. Now, let's talk about how we move forward. The CEO clapped his hands once, his voice steady but firm. Now, let's talk about how we move forward. The employees shifted nervously, unsure what to expect next. They had just witnessed their coworker get fired in front of everyone, and now their boss, the owner himself, was laying down the foundation for something new. The CEO turned toward the newly promoted store supervisor, the young woman who had just stepped up moments ago. "You understand what good customer service looks like," he said. "From now on, I want you to set the standard." She straightened her posture, still processing the weight of her new role. "I will, sir," she promised. The CEO nodded and then turned his attention to the rest of the staff. This store should represent excellence, not just in what we sell, but in how we treat people. He glanced around. Today, I saw employees treating some customers with respect while ignoring others. A few workers shifted uncomfortably, realizing their own behavior had been noticed. "That ends today," the CEO said firmly. He stepped forward, hands in his pockets. "From this moment forward, we will be making changes. Every single person in this store will go through training, real training, on professionalism, respect, and service." A murmur spread through the staff, some nodding in agreement, others looking unsure. The CEO's voice remained calm but resolute. "And if anyone has a problem with that?" His eyes scanned the room. "This might not be the place for you." Silence. Then a few employees exchanged glances before slowly nodding in agreement. One worker, a middle-aged man who had been there for years, spoke up. "Honestly, sir, I think this needed to happen." The CEO gave a small nod. "I think so too." He glanced at his watch, then exhaled. "All right. You all have work to do. Get back to it." The store slowly returned to normal, but something was different. The employees weren't just going through the motions anymore. They were paying attention, treating customers better, following the new supervisor's lead. The CEO watched it all quietly, standing near the entrance, arms crossed. For the first time that day, he felt satisfied. His company, his vision, was finally back on track. And it all started because he decided to walk through his own doors. Just as the CEO was about to leave, a customer approached him with an unexpected comment. Just as the CEO was about to leave, he heard a voice behind him. "Sir, wait a moment." He turned to see a middle-aged woman standing near the checkout counter. She clutched a shopping bag, her face filled with a mix of gratitude and quiet frustration. The CEO gave her a polite nod. "Is there something I can help you with?" She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I just wanted to say, thank you." The CEO raised an eyebrow. "For what?" The woman glanced around the store, her fingers tightening on the bag. "For stepping in today, for noticing." The CEO studied her for a moment, sensing there was more. "You've experienced this before, haven't you?" The woman let out a small, tired laugh. "Too many times." She shook her head. "I love this store. I've shopped here for years, but honestly, I almost stopped coming. I got tired of feeling invisible." The CEO's chest tightened. How many others felt the same way? How many customers had walked out without ever saying a word, just because they were made to feel like they didn't belong? The woman smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. "Not today, though. Today, you reminded me that respect still matters." The CEO took a slow breath, then nodded. "It does, and I promise you, from now on, it always will." The woman smiled sincerely, nodded, and walked out of the store. The CEO stood still for a moment, his hands in his pockets, watching the door close behind her. This wasn't just about one bad employee. This wasn't just about one incident. This was about a culture shift, a movement towards something better. And it started right here, right now. He turned back to the store, watching the employees, his employees, finally treating every customer the way they deserved to be treated. A slow smile crossed his face. This was the store he had envisioned. This was the legacy he wanted to leave. With a deep breath, He walked toward the exit, stepping outside with a renewed sense of purpose. And for the first time in a long time, he knew his company was in good hands. The CEO stepped outside, feeling the fresh air hit his face. His mind replayed the woman's words. "I almost stopped coming. I got tired of feeling invisible." That stuck with him. This wasn't just about one employee's mistake. It was about a deeper issue in the culture of his company. He had built this business to be a place of excellence, fairness, and respect. But somewhere along the way, that message had been lost. And if one customer had spoken up about it, how many others had walked away silently? The CEO exhaled, staring up at the store's bright signage. This store would change. His company would change. And it would start with him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he sent out an email, not just to this store, but to every location in his chain. Subject: a new standard for customer service. He didn't just want a policy update. He wanted real training, real accountability, and a real shift in mindset. This wasn't about sales numbers or profits. This was about the people, the customers who walked through those doors every day, expecting to be treated with respect, no matter who they were or what they looked like. And from this day forward, that's exactly what they would get. As he lowered his phone, a small smile crossed his face. The lesson wasn't just for his employees. It was for himself, too. Leadership wasn't just about making money. It was about making a difference. And today, that's exactly what he had done. With a sense of renewed purpose, he turned and walked toward his car. This was just the beginning. As the CEO reached his car, he paused for a moment, looking back at the store one last time. Today had been a wake-up call, not just for his employees, but for him as well. Change wasn't something that happened overnight. It had to be intentional, enforced, and led from the top. And as the leader of this company, that responsibility fell on him. Sliding into the driver's seat, he took a deep breath and pulled out his phone again. He had already sent the email to his stores, but there was one more thing to do: a company-wide meeting. Not just for store managers, but for every single employee, from customer service reps to corporate executives. The message would be clear: respect is non-negotiable. Bias has no place in this company. Every customer, regardless of background, will be treated with dignity. No more silent mistreatment. No more assumptions about who deserves good service. It was time to create a workplace and shopping experience that truly reflected his vision. With a decisive nod, he sent out the meeting invitation. This wasn't just about fixing one store. This was about reshaping the entire company culture. As he started the engine and drove away, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. Today, he had taken the first step toward real change. And as long as he was in charge, he would make sure that change never faded.